Hey guys, it's Tuesday, and yes, I'm here. I'm solo tonight. Chef Erica is tied up, but that's okay. You have me. Had a pretty good week doing our little mental health check-in. We're kind of getting into the groove of virtual learning. It's not nearly as intense as it was the last couple of weeks. Honestly, the last couple of weeks, about 2:30, I was ready to crawl into my bed and take a nap for the next hour and a half to 2 hours because it was kind of difficult. But we're making it. So that's all we can do. Today I have a special guest all the way from Chattanooga, Tennessee, Mia Littlejohn. She is working in the alcohol industry to provide community gardens for children. So that's kind of fun. And we're going to let her jump into how she's making these interesting transitions, which to me is the best part of this show, right? Talking to the different chefs and figuring out how they get from career to advocacy and then the ways that intersects and changes in their life. So anyway, I am going to bring Chef Mia on so that we can talk to her. Hi, how are you?
How are you?
You know what? I'm good. This week, I feel like I'm kicking this whole virtual school thing. I'm knocking it out the park. I'm feeling pretty confident.
We're in the groove.
Yeah, the week and a half ago, I was like, what am I doing? But then you know what? Honestly, you want to know what put it in perspective for me? Blue posted an article with some video of some of the children on the reservation.
Oh, I saw that because you
shared and the challenges that they're having with virtual learning. And then I was like, yeah, I'm just going to shut the fuck up about it.
Yeah.
I don't have 3 kids on the hotspot on my cell phone trying to go to virtual school. So I don't have children who are dealing with no running water while trying to go to school or using solar panels to plug in. So really, I really think I'm in a position to complain or talk about anything.
It's so true though. I think one of the trickiest parts about the pandemic in general has been that even though there's always people who have it harder than us, I think it is important still to let ourselves feel all the things because we each just have our own capacity for what we can handle on a daily basis. We have limited energy and time and resources, but it is so helpful to just take a perspective of okay, I'm just going to make the best of this because there's not a lot we can do.
No, I mean, I have been dealing with some challenges here with the state and getting my things all sorted out. But at the end of the day, it's not nearly as challenging as what other people are going to. And not to minimize my feelings, but I think what I'm not going to do is just be one of those people who's on Facebook or Instagram. Oh my gosh, virtual learning in the suburbs of Johnson County, Kansas is so hard for me with my high-speed internet. And my daughter has this Apple iPad and I'm just having a hard time about it. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. How's your daughter liking it?
You know what? I think she's feeling better about it this week too. The first, trying to get all the apps and learning how to do things. And it's just, she just turned 7. It's different for her. And then I really try to make sure that when 3:10 hits, we're done and we don't do any mentally stimulating in that way.
Yeah.
For the rest of the night. We're really our creative space, having fun, doing art outside, just not doing that. And then on the weekends, we've been taking little road trips, around Kansas and Missouri. But last weekend we had golf, so we couldn't go. But then the weekend before, we drove about an hour outside of town to Weston, Missouri, which is Missouri wine country.
Okay.
Apple orchard, and we picked apples, and it was nice.
That sounds fantastic.
We were outside for the whole day. We were both exhausted when we got back, but we needed that. We didn't, and people were oh, you didn't post any pictures. That we took them, but I intentionally was we are not going to be on our devices. We're not, because a lot of times you're trying to experience things and you're experiencing it like this. Because you're too busy. So I was no, we're going to unplug and decompress. But how are you doing with the little ones?
We're doing well. My parents just left, so we'll see how I feel in another couple weeks when I have to when it's just me and them and, reality is sinking in. But it was great. They were here for about a month and really helped kind of get us into more of a routine. So that was lot of fun. They
But
live
you
in
are
Dallas.
outnumbered. Don't you have two little ones?
I have two little
I
ones.
just have the one.
Yeah.
Little. And then she has older siblings, which is nice. Like last Friday, my 20-year-old came down from college and she was just kind of dealing with her for a large portion of the Friday. So that just gave me a little bit of like.
Yeah, totally.
So
yeah, my kids are not old enough to be in school. So they're 3. One of them just turned 5, but she missed the cutoff here in Tennessee to go to kindergarten. So
yeah. That
they're both home. They're both hanging out.
Woo!
We're making it work.
Okay, so let's just jump into this. Because you said something in our little pre-chat that was kind of nice. You're like, you like doing school gardens, but you had to figure out a way to, like we're moms and working. We got to pay bills. We can't all be passionate and, eating bonbons. We all
yeah. Well, it's funny because it kind of reminds me a little bit of something that somebody told me when I said I wanted to. When I first got out of college, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I was working in real estate in Chicago, and I really decided that wasn't for me. And so I was looking to get into food writing. And I had a mentor who was like, well, if you don't have a trust fund, you really can't be a food writer. And I was sort of like, what do you mean I can write about food? And she said, what people need is like quality recipes and the translating the commercial kitchen to the home kitchen. But they have plenty of people who are just traveling around the world, like because they're wealthy, to write articles about going to the south of France and visiting a strawberry farm. And like, you're not going to get paid for that. It's kind of like book reviewing in that way. It's a really hard thing to make money at because there's a lot of overeducated people who don't need the money who will do it for free. So I went to culinary school then in order to just learn the technical side of writing recipes. And
which oddly enough, I suck at. I've been practicing, but then when I send it to my friend, she's like, "Yeah, there's like 5 steps missing here."
Well, like, there you go. I should help you write some recipes.
Yes, because she's like, "Okay, we're frying shrimp, but how did I know they were supposed to go in the bowl?" I was like, "Because I said you needed a medium bowl." It's like, "Yeah, but you didn't tell me that the shrimp went in the bowl."
Well, it's amazing how much. I mean, a lot of times in culinary school, your chefs talk about like learning how to cook at somebody's elbow or like over their shoulder.
Yes.
And so a lot of what I do is just try to really follow a chef as closely as I can while I'm sort of standing over their shoulder, watching what they're doing, and then translating that into a way that like my mom could make sense of it at home.
Yeah, most of my professional recipes look like this. You notice anything?
Yes. Well, and a lot of times in culinary school, they give you like the least information possible because they want you to learn how to see, taste, touch, and know by doing. So they're not going to tell you how long something cooks. They're not going to give you any direction about what the texture should be. It's all about kind of learning by doing. So anyway, when I was in culinary school, I actually started volunteering with a group that was putting organic gardens in Chicago public schools.
Oh, wow.
And so that was really when I first fell in love with school gardens and also just kids around food and realizing what a great opportunity is to talk to them about what they put in their bodies. And then also just to have a lot of fun. Kids are really tactile, especially younger kids.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many great things that you can use in the kitchen as like, basically you can teach almost any subject, whether it's math or science or poetry or art can be taught in a kitchen or a garden setting. And so I kind of started getting interested in that. And then after culinary school, one of my first jobs was working developing recipes for Salsa tequila. So I worked in the alcohol industry, but I volunteered with school gardens. And then we moved from Chicago to Colorado, and I started working in school gardens there again. So they were redoing their school lunch program. And so I got to help the sort of the kitchen staff in Boulder as they were learning how to make more foods from scratch and less foods kind of from a lot of school lunch cooking over the years has become more and more based on industrial ingredients, frozen foods, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I mean, I remember fondly as a kid, my favorite lunch was the like microwaved pizza.
No, we didn't. I don't remember a lot about school lunch. What I do remember is my grandmother worked in a cafeteria. And if anybody in Kansas City is watching it, the school was called DA Homes. It's now like apartments. But they used to make the best peanut butter cookies and the best homemade rolls. And I loved like when my mom would take us up there and we would go sit in there with the kitchen with those older ladies and they were in there, making cookies.
So they were making real from scratch food, which is kind of the exception rather than the rule.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
But it's kind of gone, there's a whole spectrum of the pendulum has shifted back and now there's more salad bars. There's more, well, not since COVID, but there's more fresh fruit and more of an emphasis on better ingredients for school food. But I mean, they're still usually working with these commodity kind of quality ingredients because they just have such little funding. So a lot of what I was doing was trying to figure out ways to engage school communities and then local farms in putting gardens in school systems that could be, managed by volunteers from the community over the summer. Because a lot of the time what happens is school gets out in the summer.
The garden is like
the garden doesn't have anybody caring for it, which just creates like tons of unintended consequences like pests and rotting fruit, other things like that. So if you can find someone to kind of adopt the garden in the summer, that really works well. And then at that point, I was working for Skinny Girl, which was like another brand in the Beam portfolio and doing recipes for them. And then we moved to California. Of course, California is like the best year-round growing season in terms of it's just incredibly. And actually, that was where I had lived in California in the Bay Area when I was a kid and had a school garden when I was in elementary school there at a little public school. And I just remember how, fun it was. We, you could do that as the after school club, could be your garden club or whatever.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I don't have a green thumb, but it sounds super fun.
I mean, in California, one of the things that was really remarkable to me moving there from bigger cities, because I was born in Philadelphia, was just how everything was growing. You had lemons and limes and plums and pecan trees I guess almond trees, really. Pecans are more here in the South. But, you just had all these things, avocados and apple trees that had 10 different kinds of apples grafted on. So it was always a lot of fun to be a part of that school garden. And then when we were living in California, now I'm an adult again, I got a job working in New York, helping develop a food program at the Harlem Children's Zone. And that was a really cool project because I was working directly with the executive chef and they had a ton of outreach already in place.
Nice.
And they had space for 4 school gardens on different rooftops around Harlem. And so I got to just sort of help create curriculum to engage the classrooms. But they worked with kids, everyone from like 3-year-olds to 18-year-olds. And so it was a lot of different subject matters. Sometimes you'd do a Shakespeare in the Garden program for high school English, or you'd do, massaged kale salad for the 3-year-olds, so you got to really kind of get creative with it. And the classroom support was there where a lot of the teachers were looking for excuses to get outside into the garden. And so if you could just hand them a lesson plan that went along with 8th grade biology, that would be great.
Nice. That sounds like a lot of work, but really fun.
Yeah. So that was where, when I was in New York, and then I came to Chattanooga. This is where my husband's family's from. And I worked for a little while, or I worked for a couple of years actually, with a company that's sort of worked to change the distilling laws here in Chattanooga called Chattanooga Whiskey. And until they changed the law in 2014, it was illegal to distill alcohol or spirits in Hamilton County. And so one of the things that was kind of a holdover from the prohibition laws in Tennessee is that only certain counties could distill spirits, and then only certain counties could sell what they call liquor by the drink. So like Lynchburg, where Jack Daniels is, actually is a dry county. You can't buy alcohol there.
Oh, that's odd.
Yeah. And so Hamilton County, you could have a bar, but you couldn't have a distillery. So they changed the law in 2014, and now they distill their own product here. And I left Chattanooga Whiskey in 2016. I had a 1-year-old at that point, and I was pregnant with my second baby. And so at that point, I started doing more teaching work again. And so I've been working kind of in the consumer goods space with a guy who I knew from Chattanooga Whiskey. He did more operational stuff, and I did sort of strategic marketing work. But we created a class in partnership with one of the local accelerators here that does small business development. And it's called CoLab. So this year we taught our third class. It's a 12-week course for companies that are launching in the food and beverage space a product to go into distribution. A lot of times they already have a product in distribution, but then they're looking to scale, take it to the next level. And so I worked with the guy that I was teaching that class with. He and I then became sort of business partners, and that program that we taught became our first program for Proof, which is the food and beverage incubator that we launched in March of this year.
Right in the middle of COVID. Congratulations.
Yeah, well, the funny story about that, just like for a little bit of color and history, is the week of that, March 13th was going to be our grand opening. The weekend before, we had our soft opening, but my business partner and his wife had taken their son as like a birthday trip to London. They flew back on the 12th, and I called him and I was like, I don't know what's going on with this COVID stuff. Because at that point, we had no cases in Chattanooga, but I had been following the news. And I was like, I think you have to miss the grand opening because you're like in quarantine or something. So he was then, that was the 12th. And then on the 13th, I woke up and I had gone out the night before to try to buy like extra hand sanitizer and extra Lysol, and you couldn't find anything. Everybody had started sort of doing a run on all the grocery stores. And I was like, I'm not sure.
You thought we weren't getting out the house.
Yeah. I was like, I don't know if I have enough information to keep my staff or my customers safe. So I said on March 13th, we had a staff meeting we were going to kick off the day at noon. And I just went in and said, like, I think we're not going to open this weekend. We'll regroup on Monday and see what's really going on. And then, of course, over the weekend, it was like New York shut down, everything. It became like incredibly clear that it wasn't going to be we just opened up the next week.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was kind of, I think one of the things that's been most challenging, honestly, being in this industry, at least for me, is how uncertain the timeline has been. Yeah. Because I think initially, even those of us who were following it really closely from March through like the initial shutdown in April, it felt like maybe by the time the summer, or at least the end of the summer, rolled around, we were going to be on the other side of everything.
Yeah, I thought that too.
And it wasn't really until the weekend of July 4th, I think, that I finally accepted, like, this isn't a sprint, it's a marathon, or maybe it's the Hunger Games. I don't know, but like, I thought we were running.
Felt like it was the Hunger Games at times, for sure.
Yeah. And so, initially, because we hadn't opened yet, and so we didn't have like a to-go situation or really any kind of customer base, we really hustled. So we didn't, because we also, the other thing that was kind of unique about our situation was we didn't qualify for any of the federal aid because we didn't have any payroll going back before February 15th. Everybody had been hired since then. And then in any case, we ended up just like hustling. So we made hand sanitizer locally because we knew all the distillers and we had staff who would make that. We did food boxes initially for all the out of work restaurant workers.
Nice.
Partnering with a lot of the distributors who had orders on hand for local restaurants, but didn't have a way to distribute that food themselves. So we'd take their 50-pound bags of pasta and their cases of kale and break it down into boxes for, family size portions and just gave those away. And that actually, one thing that was cool about that industry food box program is then it got funded. And so it was able to continue for the next 3 months.
Nice.
And then let's see, we had a tornado in Chattanooga at the end of April. And then
I remember that
there was a big need that all the linemen that were trying to repair the power grid and the electrical grid needed lunches, but none of the restaurants were open. So we just made a bunch of lunches. We went to Sam's Club and got all the things that you need. And the night the tornado happened at 11 p.m. on a Sunday, it was Easter Sunday. And by 7 a.m. the next morning, we were out buying stuff to make lunches.
But that's what it takes. I think the thing that I have learned, which is as we've been doing this podcast and just having the opportunity, one, to see how people in my industry have jumped in and helped out the community. It was oh, if this happens, we have a solution to this problem. And two, to see all of the creative ways that people are, and I hate this word because it's so overused, but I have to use it, pivoting and still, keeping the business relevant and being resourceful. And I mean, yeah, why not?
Yeah, I think it's the blessing and the curse of this industry is that we're such kind of doers and problem solvers. We're so used to having to make it work and figure it out and still create a great experience for our guests. And I think that has worked to our advantage as an industry in this season because it's allowed us to really put those skills sort of on display because we are just ready to show up, ready to figure it out. And of course, initially I was glad in a lot of ways to be in the food and beverage industry just because, we were in a global pandemic, but not a famine, There was a lot of problem solving. A lot of it was just systems that had kind of failed us. So
right.
It was sort of reworking and recreating those systems. And
being creative because some people just can't think of what to do. They're oh, well, Restaurant Depot's closed.
I know. What do you do?
I don't know. Can't figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah. So we ended up waiting a little bit. We reopened our patio on May 1st. And then we reopened had our grand reopening on Juneteenth, actually on June 19th. And we launched, at that point we had 3 restaurants because our program, we have space in our, we have space for a restaurant in residency. And then we have a commissary kitchen where we have about 6 tenants at a time. And initially we had actually 2 restaurants in residency. And then we have a farm to table food truck that's out of our commissary. And so those were all 3 waiting to be launched and they had been kind of ready to go. But we had all been waiting. And so basically we just wanted to get as much information about what restaurants were doing. Initially, at least, I think the thing that was most overwhelming on our end, at least, was just that information overload. There was
not even initially, it's still overwhelming. Some days I'm just
just the kind of combination of regulatory information and then keeping your staff and your customers safe, and like, what does that look like? What sort of like updated cleaning methods do you need? What sort of UV filtering light should you invest in? How do you expand your patio at the drop of a hat? How do you reduce your capacity but still, turn enough tables that you're covering your rent? So, I think that for us, it was helpful to take a little bit longer. In Tennessee, we had the opportunity to reopen fully, including indoor dining at 50% on May 1st, but that felt pretty aggressive to us. When did you guys reopen there?
The 15th
of May. Because I remember at that point, I was talking to friends from around the country, and a lot of people were still on lockdown.
I felt like it was too early here too, but that, there was a lot. So I'm uniquely positioned between Kansas and Missouri. So it's like one of those kind of things that if Kansas City is doing something, then it's very difficult for where I live, Overland Park, not to do it. I mean, I'm a stone's throw away.
Yeah.
So if they can't be doing something different than what we're doing. And so once Mike Parsons and Kansas City decided that they were going to go ahead and open back up and escalate the phases, then we essentially had no choice but to go ahead and escalate the phases too. Because if I can go to McDonald's or across the line on state line, then I should be able to go to McDonald's right here on Metcalf. Like it just wasn't going to work. So, yeah.
And did you guys have a mask mandate when you reopened?
We do have a mask mandate. And so when the initial reopening started, they were very aggressive with enforcing the mask mandates and the occupancy rules. But, like with anything, as it progressed and they started to get pushback, you could go around and see that it was starting to be very lax in terms of and most of the time you see people in the mask is over their nose, or it's under their chin, or it's flapping down. It's not so yes, there is a mask mandate. Is it as effective as it could be? No, because the enforcement of it is not there. And I think too, I've been in stores, and those videos that they post online of people throwing bread at Trader Joe's and cursing the people out, it's not an exaggeration of the foolishness that these store workers have to deal with. Yeah. I think that a lot of times people forgot that they were essential workers, right? We were at home. They were still at the grocery store.
Right.
We had not had a moment to stop. And they're dealing with all of these different things where there's, there's more orders and more deliveries and more and more and more and more. So, yeah.
Yeah. So we reopened without a mask mandate here. Ooh. And so then we always just enforced one at our restaurant because we thought, well, for a lot of reasons, but our staff felt more comfortable. Our customers felt more comfortable. And then in June, we started actually teaching with the local Tennessee Small Business Development Center, a class called Restaurant Recovery that was kind of about following evolving guidelines, and then also about sort of a strategic update to your menu and also your operations and developing other revenue streams, keeping sort of your social media updated. I mean, a big thing that we've seen locally is just what like sort of an insurmountable burden it's placed, especially on older operators who aren't used to making big shifts or being in touch with their customers on social media. Like a lot of their customers are just lifetime customers, or they're like an old sort of school restaurant and they don't even have a Facebook. They maybe have a Google listing.
Right. That part.
So, but yeah, anyway, it's just been an interesting summer. So yeah, we, one of the programs that we've been most excited about to be able to be a part of at Proof is we realized at some point that the local undocumented community, especially the people that were working in kitchens, were between a rock and a hard place because they had not been getting unemployment. Mm-hmm. If they got a positive test, let's say they were like in their early 20s, they may still need to go to work to get their paycheck, even if it was not very, no matter how much it was putting food on the table, and that was putting it, not going to work was creating scarcity. And so we started providing meals for all the undocumented folks through a local clinic that was testing them. And so we've been doing that program with Launch Tennessee and Clinica Medicos here locally. And it's been awesome. We have a set of volunteers that deliver chef prepared meals on people's porches. It's just like a no contact drop. But that's been a great opportunity just to feed people.
Yeah, and I love that, because I do feel like that as this whole restaurant food service pandemic thing evolved, is that there were all these little pockets and nuances of people who were essential to the industry, but not, I think that they got forgotten about in the package. Like, what about the college student who's a newly college student, but still on their parents' income tax return, but then they live independent? They don't, you know what I'm saying? They didn't get a stimulus check. They don't get any type of benefit. And with the undocumented workers, I've seen that here, that's been a big problem. And some people like, well, they're doing where you just pull up with the produce and they'll put it in your car. I was like, yeah, but they don't trust that. They don't know who's going to be at those lines. They don't know if, like one of the communities around here, they had it with the police. I was like, nobody's coming to get free produce from the police. I wouldn't. And I don't have any reason not to.
Right. Yeah. And even here, I think a lot of our mobile food pantries, you have to get a voucher through the United Way. And that's like an intimidating step. I think anytime you put some of those additional barriers or I don't know, it's not easy sometimes to solve those food access issues.
Yeah.
And I mean, I couldn't agree with you more that I think one of the things in our industry that the pandemic has highlighted is how many workers and just sort of essential people to the whole equation have been forgotten and kind of left out along the way, whether it's in the federal aid or the local food banks and how those operate, or the students who are missing out on their free and reduced lunch, or, any number of pressure points that have just been accentuated and kind of also laid bare because of the pandemic, which has been, even I think about the, people who don't have insurance, which is a large percentage of Americans still. And just the additional anxiety that they're experiencing in the midst of the pandemic.
Yeah, it's not ideal. So how is the food literacy and the food program working with the schools now? Because of, are you guys back in Chattanooga? Are they back in school? Are they still virtual? Is it a hybrid situation? How are they handling that?
So we have a couple local nonprofits that ran some school drop programs for meals through the spring when we were out of school.
Mm-hmm.
And then now students are primarily back in school, but they had 3 different options. They could choose virtual. They
Mm-hmm.
could choose 2 days a week virtual, which kind of created some complications. I think now everybody's back either 5 days a week or full-time virtual or homeschool. So there's sort of 3 different options. You can get the homeschool curriculum and do it yourself. You can do it via a virtual teacher. I think it's created the biggest strain on teachers because they're being asked to do 3 different lesson plans.
Yeah. So here in my daughter's school district, they created a virtual school.
Okay.
So this teacher has a combination of students that are virtually from the assigned school and then one other school. So she's teaching those students virtually. So it's not all, if she was in a school building, every single kid that she's going virtually with would be in that building with her. They combine the 2 buildings so that it's completely virtual what she's doing.
But she's dedicated to a single class in the whole day. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I've heard some districts have gone to having robot teachers. I mean, you just hear all sorts of stuff.
I can't imagine a robot teacher with a 7-year-old.
I think it's probably just basically a glorified app.
Yeah, this lady is the saint. Some days on Friday, I'm like, man, I wish I knew where she lived because I would sure drop her a cocktail kit because I to drink because I have considered day drinking many a day, and all
Yeah,
I have to do is help her get on this or copy this or take a picture here. So I like, God, I know she needs a drink.
I'm sure.
So
Yeah.
what do you think is the next thing with this whole? I mean, we spent the whole James Beard time talking about the Restaurant Act, and then of course talking about all the food access issues that have kind of been, I think, a big spotlight. They were like little crumbs in the room that we just all was like, oh, that's there. We don't need, but now it seems like it's like, there are children who are not eating. So how do you guys think that are you still gonna be working in that space, or you don't know because of what's going on with the pandemic?
No, so we have been partnering. I mean, we've continued to partner with the food bank, and I think here locally, a big thing is just, food banks. It's all about making connections, who has what, and trading food from one part of the world to another. I think right now, to me, what I see is one of the biggest challenges is connecting to families that haven't ever experienced food insecurity before, who are really not in the system yet. So they don't have SNAP benefits, and they're not, I mean, if anyone, everyone who tried to go through any of the federal or state unemployment benefits just knows it's not an easy system to navigate in any way, shape, or form. And so I think that's a big challenge,
Well,
especially
because there was a lack of guidance. Like
yeah,
they didn't get any guidelines to change their guideline. They didn't get any oversight as to how to change the guidelines, specifically with the SNAP program. So you have parents here that I hear about who are getting kicked off of their SNAP because their college student couldn't move into their dorm. Now,
right.
college student is working, independent, living and doing their own thing. However, their still physical address is the home. So they don't have any federal guidelines as to how to adjust that benefit
Yeah.
because they didn't think they just did not think about these college students. It's like if the dorms are closed due to COVID and you send them back home, how are you now penalizing families for allowing their children to come back home? Where else are they supposed to go? The
Yeah.
dorm is closed. Like they can't live on campus. They have nowhere else to go. So now you're taking away food benefits for the younger children in the family because the older kid had to come back. There's not a lot of guidelines with the rules on any of these state agencies. They haven't, I've seen a lot of states have not figured out how to tweak their rules to match
Yeah.
up with what is going with this current environment. And to me, being a chef, maybe some of the shit to me is just super common sense. Like, come on, is it that hard?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the neatest stuff we've seen here is doing like grocery delivery via schools for those families who have been impacted, instead of trying to, because so many of the state and federal benefits are kind of like you were describing, just harder to access, also not necessarily tailored yet for the current moment. And so I don't know. I mean, I think another thing that we're seeing is restaurants doing food drives or donations.
That's good.
And that's been really neat to see, whether, I mean, it's not the issue is really that it needs to be a federal level fix, because otherwise it's not going to make the impact that it could. And I think the food scarcity and I think the other big issue is trying to figure out how to pause evictions, which I guess is in the works and doesn't have as much to do with food. But I think, food and shelter are such essentials for people right now that are especially, since we haven't had any additional, the additional unemployment isn't there anymore. So that was helping people kind of stay afloat.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing too, is that people, I have decided to stop getting in these like long Facebook arguments with people because I've gotten people like, well, why don't they just take an Uber to the store if they can't find a grocery store? Because the Uber ride is like 2 or 3 days worth of meals. Are you serious right now? You want someone who is dealing with food access to get in an Uber to ride to the other side of town to get to the store? That's ridiculous. That's silly. No, they can't take an Uber. And the second thing is, the weird part of it being like food service employees, like understanding that 13% of the people who actually work in a restaurant are now dealing with, some of them were already dealing with food access, but now are really dealing with food access issues because they can't access, they don't understand the system or how to tap into these other resources.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that sort of connecting the dots is one of the hardest things, because it's like a lot of times, there's still statistics about like the amount of food that we waste in this country, but it really is just so tricky to navigate the system if you're on sort of the on that spectrum where you're struggling with food access. And then, and food access can come in like a lot of forms. It can come from like resource scarcity. It can come from living in a food desert. It can come from, having some kind of family circumstance that's like, depriving you of your primary source of income. So many people are still struggling with unemployment. I think, that it's almost like we've lost the urgency on that front. And I mean, it's hard on an emotional level. I'm curious, what are you guys seeing, or what are you guys doing that's most exciting in Kansas City that you guys like? Have you figured any of that stuff out?
No, because when you're in this weird position like where we are, where you're in this bi-state area where you might have an employee who lives on my side of town, but who works on the other side of town. Okay, so that person is having a completely different unemployment experience because they're technically filing in another state, although they live in this state, or vice versa, where you live in Missouri, but you work in Kansas. So then instead of you being on the Kansas system, you now have to navigate the unemployment system in a whole nother state, in which you do not reside. So you don't have any resources, you don't have anybody you can talk to. And so on the Kansas side, Kansas, if you've looked at any, and in terms of unemployment, they're like dead last in terms of getting it figured out. If in any of the post groups you go to, there are people who are still waiting on payments from all the way back to March.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that here in Tennessee. And I mean, even just talking with the food bank here, the food bank serves, I think it's like 19 counties. Most of them are rural.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of it is about satelliting food out to these other markets. And in some ways, the services that we have in a city like Chattanooga, we have a lot more access to food and to services than people do in those rural markets.
Yeah.
And, I honestly, I think one of the things I really loved about being a part of the James Beard Chefs Advocacy for Change group that you and I were both part of was just kind of understanding that sharing our stories and telling our stories and talking about what we're seeing is helping to create more change, and then figuring out like, how can we tell our stories in ways that are really going to create change? Like, who do we need to talk to, and how do we, I think there was a class that we did called Map Our Influence.
Yes, that class was hard, but yes, the mapping of
great in a lot of ways, because it helped me think differently about the web of people that, if you and I are talking here as two chefs about, these things that are really heavy on our hearts, what can we do to create positive change in that space? And what can who can we talk to? Who can we identify that may have more ability to, talk to the right people to explain, that these are the issues we're seeing on the ground. So a big thing that I've been working on, I have sort of two areas that I'm trying to advocate for right now. One is just mental health and support for our industry. And there's a big aspect about working in kitchens that's wonderful, and that it leans into this so hardworking, and you kind of get rewarded if you're like, I had a chef who used to say, be like a duck, where you're furiously paddling under the water and no one can tell because you're just skating along.
But inside you're like,
yeah, but that's not actually a way to handle a pandemic, and it's not a way to like manage our own mental health. I think you and I have talked just about like some of the small ways that you can do like daily check-ins with your friends, with yourself, where you just take a breath. It's like some of that stuff. I mean,
that little thing on my Apple Watch are super familiar with each other. I'm like, yeah, I think I'm gonna breathe for a minute. Let me just.
But I mean, I think, I'm a little bit older than a lot. I think the industry tends to skew so young that, some of the things I've learned over my 20 years as a chef and working in food and beverage is that you can't let yourself you can push yourself past the limit, and you really have to sort of prioritize yourself to the point that you're not doing that. It's still hard not to do it, but I do my concern is for a lot of the young people that work in food and beverage who are also without strong support systems. Maybe they're like did just graduate from college and they moved to a new city, or maybe they're at college and they're far away from their families and their sort of lifetime networks. And so trying to help across the industry just identify what the resources are from a mental health perspective. And then the other one is, I think there's a few loopholes, and food access and scarcity is one of them. But then the other one is taking care of, undocumented workers. And that, I don't think should be something that's overlooked in the next federal aid package, hopefully. And I mean, there's a lot of other things. And I think it's awesome. The more you dig into what kinds of stuff you can kind of make a difference if you just talk about it, the more exciting it can be.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like out of that class, what did you kind of come out feeling like you wanted to talk about?
Well, I just felt like I should just talk about it. I think that you get into the space where you're like, I just cook. Nobody really cares what I think about this, that, or the third. I just cook. And understand, and I don't just cook. Being in a space where you're an employer for 10 or 15 years, you help people navigate through their mental illness and through their health insurance issues and through childcare and through take home a little extra food until you can get to the next check kind of situation. So we're always in this space where maybe at the time, because you're in the for-profit space, you're advocating within the family of your business. But these are issues that we as restaurateurs deal with, and we see firsthand because it affects most of our staff. They're the most overworked and underpaid group of people that there are. For people to still think that servers can survive on $3.65 an hour draw, like what the hell? Like it's freaking 2020, $3.65. Or for people to say things like, oh, people are getting rich on unemployment. Literally $600 a week is $15 an hour for a 40-hour work week. If anybody is getting rich on $600 a week, that's the problem. It shouldn't be a reason for people to get rich. That's the problem. Will is in Seattle. It is heartbreaking, Jeff Will. Yes, they've been dealing with all kinds of different things in Seattle. So now I feel like I'm in a space where I have to speak up. We are in a position here with my nonprofit where we were doing those USDA boxes. And I think that I'm going with my gut on this one. I will probably be discontinuing my participation in the program because they changed the box. They're adding milk, cheese, and processed meat. I don't really feel like people, and as we head into cold and flu season need dairy. Dairy causes inflammation and mucus.
Yeah.
And we don't need it. And I don't feel comfortable about giving people pre-cooked taco meat and hot dogs. Like,
yeah.
I wouldn't eat that. And so I still have that whole part of my, if I do eat a hot dog, it's like from Whole Foods. It's got like, you know what I'm saying? It's like the most expensive, stupid hot dog you've ever bought because it's all
So
beef.
they don't have a vegetarian option for the boxes?
They were, prior to this round, they were all vegetable. It was 25 pounds of vegetables.
Yeah.
Now they're adding processed meat, cheese, and dairy, like a gallon of milk. You know, when you look at the makeup of someone's ability to purchase food on their SNAP benefit, right? Milk is not a high ticket item. It's in the store. You can get milk on your SNAP for $1.25 tops.
Yeah.
A gallon of milk.
Mm-hmm.
But where you spend the most money is if I want to buy a head of broccoli, or if I want to buy a thing of cantaloupe, or if I want to buy, those are the items. That fresh fruit and vegetable piece is the part that people overlook because it doesn't feel like a bang for their buck, right? I can buy this one head of broccoli, or I can buy 4 cans of canned green beans.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I don't think, but of course, you know that the powers that be are not thinking about the boxes and the nutrients and the way that they impact people's diets.
Well, unfortunately, a big part of the way that the federal funding for food in general works is it's got those powerful lobbies. So like the ones that you just mentioned, dairy, you know, the dairy lobby, the cheese lobby, and the meat or processed meat, you know, they have a lot of, I mean, and that's the other thing is they're the ones getting subsidized. And so it's weird. It's like this totally backwards economy that doesn't, because, you know, really that stuff that you're talking about, fresh fruits and vegetables, should be something that we're subsidizing that should be more accessible, not less accessible.
Right. When I can already go to the corner store and get canned green beans, I don't need you to provide me with that. What I can't go down there and get is a bag of romaine lettuce to make a good leafy green salad, or kale to cook down into some greens. Okay, so before we go, this is always my like trivia question. Why? Because earlier in this whole COVID situation, I was turning 42, and I'm just like a weirdo. Every time it's time for my birthday, I start to have these like overachiever meltdowns, and like, I haven't cured cancer, and there's still world hunger, and people have AIDS, and people are starving in Africa, and I suck. I'm not a productive individual because I haven't done any of these things. So, but I did do that, and then I always have to do my and my therapist is like, it's your birthday, it's time for you to kick in on your extra weekly sessions before you spaz. So the one thing we talked about is 2020 is like a pause, the great reset. And so, what's one thing that you are going to leave in this COVID era professionally, and then one thing that you think that industry needs to leave. So my thing is what you said, working myself like that duck. I'm not going to continue to work myself until I, crash into the wall at 100 miles an hour, and then give myself one day to get my shit together and then work like a fool until I hit that wall again. I'm not doing that post-COVID anymore. And then the other thing that I think professionally needs to be left is $12 a person. Please stop calling me and asking me to cater for you for $12 a person. Can't nobody cook for nobody for no $12 a person, okay? Just stop it. Leave that. Leave it. Nobody's cooking nothing. I can't go to McDonald's for you for $12 a person.
That's great. What am I going to leave in 2020? I think, I think one of the things that I've been most surprised by is just that being really transparent this year has been one of the things that I think I was initially most uncomfortable about, like just being vulnerable. And I've found that that's actually been probably one of the most rewarding things. Even though I'm connecting with fewer of my like close friends in person, I'm finding that connecting with people, in
Yeah.
being able to share, just what's really going on, and that I'm not perfect, and that this year has been hard.
They're harder working hard because it's
So I think just being able to accept that this has been a challenging year, and being real about that, I guess, is one of the things that I have learned from 2020 that I think and I hope I take with me into future years. One of the things I'm hoping to let go of is just that false sense of control that I used to feel. And then I was expecting to be returned to me. And I was sort of pissed when it didn't get brought back. And I was like, wait, I know I'm good at this. Why are all these extra variables being thrown in?
Right.
So,
right. Yeah, that's my, if this happens, then what am I going to do exercise that I stay up all night and play with myself before something. I'm not going to do that anymore. It's okay, I want to be prepared. So if this happens, then what am I going to do? And then if that happens, what am I going to do? No.
Yeah, you can't control the future. So you just have to show up for the present.
And roll with the punches. Okay, industry-wide, what do you think we should leave as an industry? Just no more.
I think we need better pay for the people at the bottom.
Yeah.
A living wage. I mean, I guess that's the way people talk about it, is a living wage.
Yeah, I don't know how we expect people to live on $3.65 for servers and $7, or what's the national minimum wage, $7.35 or $7.85?
Yeah, seven something. I mean, it's too little.
I don't know how anybody expects anybody to do anything for 40 hours a week for $7 an hour. I just don't. $10 an hour is still not enough.
Yeah, no. And I'm hopeful for the industry and just everyone in any industry that we can move towards a better living wage, and also healthcare and mental health care coverage that, doesn't create all of these sort of unequal points of access.
I like that. Yeah, I like that. Equal points of access is a good way to put it, because it's kind of shitty right now. So I do like that. Well, thank you. Today has been you guys are doing a lot there. I love that little dinner you guys were doing a couple weeks ago. It looks so good. I was like, I'm driving up to Chattanooga just so I can get a box.
We'll have another one of those, so I'll make sure to tell you.
Yes, so I can post it too, and people can support online, or if there's people that are in the area that they'll know about it. So this has been fun. We're definitely going to
for having me.
So thank you for coming and talking and sharing. I appreciate it. So I will see everybody next Tuesday, 6:00 p.m. Central, for the conversation. Thank you guys for watching.
Bye, everyone.